Thanks for staying with us. Western Cape business owners are feeling the pinch as the taxi shutdown in the province continues. This has sparked concerns on the economic impact this has had on the livelihoods of the most vulnerable. And of course, this is going to be one of the conversations that we will be looking into at the show. And remember, yesterday we told you about Santaco saying that it's now launching that legal bid in order to ensure that it does not go back to the streets. They also want the cars that have been impounded to be returned back to them. So we'll continue then to bring you more on this as we count the costs of the shutdown in the Western Cape.
Well, let's talk now about the other big story of the day, and that is a decision from the National Commissioner of Correctional Services on the fate of former President Jacob Zuma. Is he likely to go back to prison? We'll explore the issue further now and look at some of the political and legal implications of whatever decision is made on the matter. We'll have that analysis for our viewers a little bit later on. But let's check in with our reporter, Canny Maphanga, now on when this decision is likely to be made. Canny, we've been foreshadowing this very important decision for most of the day. Today is the day we're expected to hear what's going to happen. What's the latest on this? Is it likely to be, you know, a quarter to midnight situation?
Well, good afternoon to you, Iman, and you as well as the viewers at home. We're still standing by waiting for the Commissioner to make a decision regarding the fate of the former president's incarceration. You may remember after the Concord's dismissal, it essentially left the decision in the executive's hands because the SCA at the time thought it was premature to decide on the interested parties' request to put an order in there stating that the medical parole should not count towards the 15th-month sentence. Now, we know the deadline that DCS set for themselves is Thursday, the 10th of August. Although it is after 5 p.m., they still have a number of hours before this day finishes. So we do expect that they will be sticking to their deadline of the 10th of August. We haven't heard anything different from the DCS as we speak right now, Iman.
All right, we know that you and our team are on standby in the event that that announcement is made. If the former president is sent back, one of the things that are likely then is the possibility of him returning to the Escort Correctional Centre. But what are you hearing about what it means for the time he could serve and whether this indeed is possibly an outcome?
Well, remember the Commissioner sought submissions from interested parties regarding this issue. Now, we know the former president, for example, has a clear position that he has completed his 15th-month sentence while on parole, which he aligned along with that previous statement that was released by DCS confirming this. And then, of course, the DA, the official opposition, they have a different position in their submissions, stating that the medical parole, the time spent on parole, cannot count or cannot suffice for the 15th-month sentence that was given to the former president. So essentially, the DCS commissioner has to decide on that. And then, of course, we're not sure if a new process will start. Remember, when DCS assigns, they look at a number of factors because their correctional facilities are different, and there is a security risk factor that is looked at before assigning an inmate to a particular facility.
I mean, it's worth noting, Canny, that only recently former President Zuma returned from a visit to Russia. That's where he spent weeks getting medical checkups and treatment for an unspecified condition. As we've just been talking about, he's been out on medical parole, the issue here. And given, as you've also just mentioned, that the Correctional Services Commissioner confirmed he'd received representations from several parties, it would seem logical that whatever his treatment in Russia entailed, that might be possibly relevant here.
Well, it could be, Iman, but remember the Concord dismissal deals with the fact that the SCA found that the medical parole itself was unlawful. So I don't know if that process would have to start afresh again, but as we speak to this day, the medical parole was considered unlawful. They've received those submissions and representations, and we do understand that although the DCS Commissioner will be making this executive decision, it is not an absolute decision. So if this decision is not in accordance to the law and is not seen as something that is in accordance with the law with interested parties, then we can expect that such a decision would be taken on review. So I think there's a lot of factors for the DCS Commissioner to decide on before making such a monumental decision regarding the incarceration fate of the former president.
It's a big decision, Canny. High alert in KwaZulu-Natal, in the province, we are told. You've got joint police, SANDF, special public order policing units from other provinces. A great deal of concerns as to what would happen and what could possibly happen, depending on what we hear from the DCS later tonight. Anything else that you're hearing about, how the responses around this could potentially be managed?
Well, not necessarily much coming from the security cluster. I think we're just simply waiting for that executive decision, which will chart the way forward, Iman, on the former president's incarceration. Of course, the previous instance that we saw did see some violence that followed afterwards. And then we have seen with the national shutdown that was held by the EFF, the kind of capacity and resources that are available to the South African government. And one could anticipate that they would be ready for such a recurrence if it were to happen. But not to speculate any further, we'll be monitoring the DCS as they are expected to stick to their deadline and make that decision by the National Commissioner public by the 10th of August, which is today.
Just a final one, operationally, I mean, do we know, is it going to be via Zoom? Is there potentially going to be a news conference, a statement? Any word at all as to how that announcement is likely to be made?
We expect for a statement to be released by the communications team of the Department of Correctional Services. We expect that it will be public and we'll all have access to that at the same time. As I've stated, we have been standing by for a number of hours, since the early hours of the morning, awaiting that decision by the Commissioner.
Lots of energy drinks at hand, I hope, Canny. SABC news reporter Canny Maphanga, the latest on the DCS decision on former President Jacob Zuma's prison sentence, and it's possible that it would happen before the end of today, although we don't have confirmation as to exactly when.
Let's stay with this issue and explore some of the political and legal implications of this decision. Whatever it is and whatever decision is made in this regard, let's now speak to Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, Director at NMU Centre for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy. And we also have Melusi Xulu, Managing Director at Donda Attorneys. Good afternoon to you both, and thank you so much for your time. I'll start with you, Melusi. How much of a challenge is this for the Commissioner? Melusi, I think you are on mute.
Hey. Good afternoon to you, Bongi, and people at home. Hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Yes, my assessment is that the National Acting Commissioner, or the Commissioner at DSC, is between a rock and a hard place, because if he makes a decision that supports the former President Zuma, and he says the time that he served during the medical parole, which has been decided to have been an unlawful decision, if he says he has served time due to that, there could be still a challenge from the interested parties such as the DA and the AfriForum. But if he decides that the former president must be arrested, obviously there are security issues around that, but one must also then ask themselves what law must be applied.
Now, Melusi,
what was interesting for me, Bongi, is that I looked at section.
Pardon me. I think there's a bit of a delay in communication there. Does the law give him room to maneuver?
Okay. I think let's look at how we can interpret Section 39 as subsection 6 of the Correctional Services Act, the 1998 Act. It says, if the commissioner is satisfied that the prisoner was released in an erroneous manner, he can decide to issue a warrant for two things. One, to have him to be readmitted and for him to serve his sentence. But it says if he's satisfied, which gives him discretion. So I believe that it will be up to him to decide. But I still believe, Bongiwe, that should he decide that the former president can be released, I still believe he will be challenged by the interested parties that I've just mentioned.
And Prof, you know, one of the things is that while on a legal front, we can expect whatever legal challenges to follow, whatever decision is then made, there are also political implications to consider as well. Prof, you are on mute as well.
Thank you very much for that question, my sister, and also good evening to my colleague. You know what, Sisi, there are a couple of concerning issues here. Let us be frank and clear about those. One is, why is there so much obsession about Zuma? I fail to understand it. We are unable to deal with Zamazamas, a simple matter. We are unable to deal with that. There are mass shootings that are happening in different places in the Eastern Cape. We also have a number of killings that are happening throughout the country. We have not dealt with those, but we are so obsessed with Zuma. I don't know where this obsession comes from. That is just one thing. But then secondly, the question for me becomes, did Zuma not serve the 15-month sentence that was delivered by Stacey Kambembe? The answer for me is in the affirmative. He served that sentence. And then the next question will be, did Zuma give himself parole? The answer is an emphatic no. He did not give himself parole. And while he was on parole, he could not move around as freely as he would have wanted to until his parole period was over. Only then was he able to move freely. So then the question becomes, is there a law for Zuma and a law for other South Africans? Because you remember that not so long ago, you had Shabir Sheikh being given a medical parole, and then he was seen playing golf. And the DA was as silent as ever. AfriForum was as silent as ever. But then all of a sudden, they found their voice and they are challenging each and every decision that is taken for as long as it affects Zuma. Then the last point is, why are our justices compromising their profession and in fact demeaning themselves? Because this is what it amounts to for me. You have to apply the law without being influenced by anything. If you remember the judgment that was delivered by Stacey Kambembe, it was riddled with emotions. And in fact, in my view, she didn't follow the law because she kept saying that Zuma cannot frustrate the Zondo Commission, which is a point that Justice Zondo also made. Zuma cannot frustrate the commission because he's the former head of state. And then Stacey Kambembe was saying the same thing. Zuma cannot frustrate the commission, and he cannot defy the summons and so on and so forth. What then happened to the, maybe my colleague Donda will assist me here. What happened to the saying that we are all equal before the law? So, if indeed we are all equal before the law, why can't you judge Zuma based on facts and forget about the fact that he's the former head of state? So there are a number of political questions that need to be asked. And then, of course, there are a number of role players who have to explain to the nation what game is it that they are playing. And then, of course, in the event that he were to be sent to jail, are we prepared to lose so many lives again like it happened in 2021? Are we prepared to lose so many jobs? Are we prepared to destroy the infrastructure? At what cost? What are we going to gain by doing that? So
I've got two questions then at the back of that, but I'm going to come back to one of them in just a moment, Prof, and I'm going to put it to Melusi because the contempt of court is quite serious. So, I mean, listening to what Prof is saying, and he says there seems to be an obsession, there wasn't a reliance on the law and all of that, you've heard it, I cannot even repeat all of it. In your view, how do you react legally to what he's just said?
Okay. Bongiwe, I think in 2021, we did have a discussion on this particular case. It was even compared to a former president, I think P.W. Botha. Mngomezulu will assist me, Professor Mngomezulu will assist me on that correctness. What happened in P.W. Botha's case, the former president, during apartheid, he didn't come to a commission, one of the commission, I think it's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but the matter had to go to court first. It had to be tried before he was sentenced. Now, the issue with this particular case, if we have to go back, besides discussing the commissioner's decision, is that he was convicted without a trial. Now, in South Africa, Section 35 of the Constitution is clear. before you are convicted, you have your rights as an accused, and that's the issue at hand. But however, we are not at that stage now. We've passed that part, the point of issue. What we are discussing now is the issue of this medical parole. And maybe if I'll just shift a bit on you, there are two things I've noticed. In the Pretoria High Court, it was decided that the time that he served will not be counted on medical parole. But what Judge Makgothi said, I hope I've pronounced it correctly, he said it's not the decision of the court to decide whether he served his time or not. That is the decision of the commissioner. And that is why we are waiting until 5 minutes to 12 today to hear what the decision will be.
And that has been, a huge part of his defense as well, because as, he said himself that he didn't give himself this particular parole. But Prof, before we even move to another issue, you say there seems to be an obsession with Zuma. Who is obsessed with him?
It's a number of people. It started at the Zondo Commission when Zuma appeared before Justice Zondo. He was not treated like everyone else. I remember very well because I fielded 6 interviews on that day. And one of the callers was saying that Zuma should be treated differently because he is the suspect in this matter. And I said, no, you are missing the point. A commission, and my colleague Donda will assist me here, a commission operates differently from a court of law. If you are in a commission, its mandate is basically to find facts. That's it. Unlike in a court situation where we have a plaintiff, we have a defendant, and then you weigh evidence, and then the judge arrives at a decision. I said that is wrong. Everyone appearing before Justice Zondo was in fact a witness, and then you have to collect as much information as possible to enable you to compile a report and then make those recommendations. But then what happened when, let me just finish this point.
Okay.
After Zuma had appeared before Zondo, and then he felt that he was not treated like everyone else. Hence his decision that Zondo must recuse himself. Then Zondo became a referee, a player, and then, of course, the one recording the score. Because he said, I'm going to look into the matter and I'm going to come back with a decision whether I'm recusing myself or not. And he set a precedent, which is why Kubutile Janj is doing exactly the same thing on the Mkhwebane matter. And then what happened after that? Zondo then said, because you have in fact defied the summons, I'm going to the Constitutional Court, not any other court. I'm going to the Constitutional Court. And then when he arrived there, he said in the event that Zuma is found guilty, he must be sentenced to 2 years. My question was, if I'm taking Donda to court, can I then prescribe the sentence? The answer is an emphatic no. What happened to the 1949 Act, which said that if you have defied summons, you can be punished in 2 ways. One, you can serve 6 months in jail, or you can pay £50.
So, Prof,
was that repeated?
Very briefly, we're almost out of time. Very, very briefly, it sounds then like whatever decision is being made here, one could argue that everyone or the commissioner is now going to be held to ransom because you are considering the July unrest, you're considering everything else. So he now has to make one decision because this is what he needs to take into account. One would argue that we're backing him into a corner.
Is it for me or for Donda?
For you, Prof.
No, for me, there is no reason. We shouldn't be having this discussion, my sister, honestly. We shouldn't be having this discussion. Zuma was sentenced 15 months by Justice Kambembe, Sisi Kambembe. And then he went to jail in escort. Then Arthur Fraser gave him a parole. Whether that parole was okay or not, I'm not interested in that. The point is, he was given a parole and he served that parole period to the end. Only then was he a free man. So why are we having this discussion? I really don't understand it. That's why I'm saying there is this obsession about Zuma, which I fail to understand where it comes from a number of quarters, and then time does not allow. Otherwise, I would have listed a couple of them who are having those vested interests.
So both of you, please stay close to your phones, because should that decision be made during the course of the show, we'll certainly be calling you back, because this is one of those matters that really needs a lot of just teasing out, because there are just so many, avenues to this one, particularly even when you think about that that report that was then released into the July unrest. But let me thank you both for your time. That is Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, NMU Centre for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy Director, as well as Melusi Xulu, Donda Attorneys, MD.